Hello, and welcome to another episode of Tuesdays with Tally. The mission and the goal of this podcast is to bring an engaging conversation that will add value to the lives of everyday people. We will inspire, encourage, educate, and tell the stories of America's finest men and women in an effort to motivate you to live your life to its fullest potential. Be sure to follow us on social media and search Tuesdays with Tally. Be sure to subscribe, follow, and share the program as well. And now your host, Brian Tally.
Welcome back to Tuesdays with Tally Podcast, where we add real life value to the lives of everyday people. Be sure to follow us on social media and on Spotify. The online information and handles are all located on the scrolling ticker at the bottom portion of your screen. We are on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Anchor FM, and Spotify. Simply search Tuesdays with Tally. And be sure to like, share, and subscribe to get every episode and stay up to date with the latest and greatest our guests in this show has to offer. Now, folks, we have got a very special guest joining us on today's program. Chad Prather grew up in Augusta, Georgia, and learned to find joy and amusement in even the most unremarkable moments that life has to offer. Now, most of us are born into this world kicking and screaming, but Chad Prather most certainly came out laughing. The comedian, musician, and armchair philosopher is an unapologetic champion for anyone looking for a reason to smile. Prather's God-given gift to entertain and inspire has made him a household name, and he's grown accustomed to captivating millions of viewers on any given day. With that, we are honored to be joined by Chad Prather. Happy New Year.
Hey, happy, Brian. Good to be with you, buddy.
Yes, sir. Hey, the pleasure is all mine, man. This is great, man, to be sitting across from you, eyeball to eyeball, and, sitting down with one of the most educated and funniest guys I know. So, I mean, and that is sincere.
I appreciate that, man. I appreciate that. I've been looking forward to being on the show. I was hoping we could end the year together and do the show, but schedules were crazy. So I'm glad you fit me in.
Fit you in. Yeah, I'm glad I kind of got you to fit into my schedule here. But I tell you, this is going to be the first show of 2023, folks. We are starting this show off with a bang with Chad Prather. And again, today we celebrate 144 days since I started this brand new podcast. We are only 144 days old, and Chad Prather is episode 98. Folks, buckle up. This is going to be one hell of a ride. Again, Chad Prather joining us on the first episode of 2023 for Tuesdays with Tally. Now, Chad, you were conceived in Texas.
Yeah.
You were born in Jersey, and you were raised in Georgia. Now, what was life like growing up as a kid in backwoods of Georgia?
Well, we didn't really know we were in the backwoods. I grew up in Augusta, Georgia, which is a very suburban, middle-sized town in Augusta. People know it well. It's kind of become a pretty large town now, but my father was a builder, and he was a general contractor and ended up having a development company. And he built the house that I grew up in. And I think we moved into that house somewhere around the age of 3 years old after bouncing around from, some apartments and things like that when I was a baby. And my mother still lives in that house that my late father built, and they still live down in the woods on that property. And I was in the woods, man. And for a hyperactive kid, that was probably the best place for me to be, out there catching snakes and shooting squirrels and swinging on vines and building tree houses and climbing to the tops of these trees. And, it really motivated me as I got older. I didn't grow up with neighborhood kids. And so, when I went to school, I had to go to school to see my friends. Because a lot of people grow up where you can just run down the street and run into your friends. I didn't have any of that stuff, so I was kind of the outcast in a lot of ways early on. I didn't wear the right clothes or didn't know all the right people and things like that. And so it kind of taught me, in looking back on that, it kind of taught me to be pretty self-sufficient in a lot of ways. I was your typical latchkey kid. My mother ran an antique mall, and so she was often gone, running the stores. And My dad, of course, he was a builder, so he was never home. So when I came home, I was home alone. And so, if I wasn't out in the woods, the TV taught me. And a lot of times I'll tell people that, Brian, and people say, oh, I would never trust the TV to indoctrinate my kids. But, back in the 70s and early 80s, TV had some pretty wholesome programming on it. I'm not saying they weren't conditioning our minds, but there were some things that you could learn from. And so growing up, I was kind of a popular culture trivia buff, and I learned a lot of things from TV. And the TV in a lot of ways raised me. And I was a kid that grew up with a little bit of a conscience because I feared my father. I knew he'd beat my ass if I got out of line. So, growing up down in those woods, that's one thing I'm thankful for is when I got out of there, one of the things as an adult that drove me to Texas was that I could see the sky in Texas. I growing up down in those woods, you had to look straight up to see any blue of the sky. And I'm happy. I'm kind of claustrophobic, so I'm happy that I came to Texas where I actually see the sky again. But of course, now you know this. I'm living in the Woodlands, Texas now, north of Houston, which there's trees all over us again. So I'm like, well, I guess I've kind of come back home in a lot of ways.
Yes, sir. And Chad's that new guy in town in the Woodlands that's burning his trash in the backyard.
Yeah, you're not far off from that. In fact, I walked past my little fire pit today, and I said, I think maybe I need to build a little fire out there tonight and get rid of some of these boxes from Christmas. The HOA loves me, man. I'm telling you, I'm the redneck in town.
Oh man! Now, guys, let's get right to it. I mean, a lot of you guys know who Chad is, and if you don't, you're going to find out here really quick. Now, you became internet famous in 2015 when a video you posted on social media dubbed "Unapologetically Southern" went viral. Now, since that moment, you have built quite the massive following. What's life been like for you since that moment happened, and how has your life changed as a result?
Well, it was kind of crazy because prior to that video taking off the way that it did, I was sort of Facebook famous. I had a few videos that had seen, been viewed millions of times. And so there were a lot of people who were following me on social media. And that was weird. I often described it as, when my social media started to blow up, it was like kind of you threw the door open to your house and let people just come rummage through your underwear drawer. I immediately had to start hiding family pictures and making sure there was access to my life that was kind of cut off from the general public. And this happened when I was, I was 42, 43 years old when that happened. I'm glad that it happened when I was 42 and not 24, because at least at that age, I was mature enough and had been through enough stuff in life to kind of navigate through what was happening in my life. And people always say, oh, you're famous. I'm like, no, I'm not famous. Like I went through a period where a lot of people in a certain realm knew who I was. Fame is all relative, right? Fame is kind of, if somebody knows, then they know. If they don't, then they don't. But, I have people all the time, they say, well, are you famous? I don't know who you are. I said, well, then to you, I'm not famous. So it all works out. But it's weird because I don't think people are built to be famous. I don't think anybody. That's why you see so many lives fall apart. Come back. You still got me?
Yes, sir.
Gotta love technology. That's why you see a lot of lives fall apart over fame, childhood fame, things like that. They grow up, and next thing you know, they're addicts and they're abuse and all these different things. I've said for a long time, I don't think people are designed to have that many eyeballs on them. So I've been able to handle, the virality of what I've done on social media over the years in a healthy way. I'm not saying it hasn't been without its problems. It has had its problems. It's led to some struggles in relationships and things like that. But, it's been one that I've tried to handle, at least on the business side of it, somewhat effectively. And I saw, for me, when I jumped on social media in 2007, to me, it was a big sociological experiment. I wanted to see what made people, choose certain things and what made them react to certain things. And so I was able to take that many eyeballs and sort of turn it into a business. I kind of had lightning in a bottle. What do you do when you have millions of people that are following and listening to what you have to say? And a comedian friend of mine said, man, you should start selling tickets and start doing comedy shows. I said, well, I've never really done comedy. I've been on stage many times, but we went out and started selling tickets. He said, it doesn't matter. Just if people buy tickets and they come to the show, then, then great. That's a great business. So into 2015, we started doing that. And, honestly, when things like Unapologetically Southern, when that video went viral, Brian, I didn't even know it had gone viral. I had no clue. And that's oftentimes the way these things happen. You'll put something out there and then you forget you even did it. And next thing you know, Fox News is calling saying, we want to have you on the morning show so we can talk about this video you did. You got to go back and look at what you said. Because if you're anything like me, I say a lot of stuff that I don't even remember. And so I had to go back and even, I had to go back and try to figure all that stuff out. And, that led to Fox News had me on pretty regularly there. It turned into almost a weekly deal. I was on Fox and Friends, and, it just one thing led to another. And then I kind of evolved over into the political humor side of things. And it's been a weird journey, man. I'll just tell you, it's been something very odd. I don't know if I've navigated it all completely correctly. I don't know what I've done, because I didn't really have a guidepost. I didn't have any maps to try to tell me how to navigate suddenly having that much attention. But here we are, it's 7 years later and almost 8 years later, and still doing live shows, still going out entertaining people. I just did a live feed video with about 4,000 or 5,000 people that were watching on Facebook right before I jumped on here to record this with you, talking about some of the current events. I've got this show on Blaze TV, the Chad Prather show. And, that was a podcast. It was a once a week podcast, audio only, that now has turned into a 5-time-a-week television show. And, for whatever reason, God's given me the grace to have this big platform, and it's very humbling. It's exhausting at times, but I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. It's just really been a blessing. I live a somewhat isolated, even lonely life when you really think about who your inner circle is. But I've got some great people. But to have that expanded pond, where the ripple effect has reached out so far and touched so many lives, and so many lives have touched me, is really a blessing when you think about it. Not everybody gets to live the way I've been able to live and connect with the people across the country and around the world, really, in the way that I have been able to. So it's a weird 21st century phenomenon, right? That you can use this crazy thing, this thing that's both a gift and a curse called social media, to not only impact your own life, but impact so many of the lives around you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, indeed. And, look, let's face it, you are an educated man. I've met you several times. I've listened to you speak. You're a motivational speaker. You're a writer. You're an influencer. I've seen you, on stage when you're doing your stand-up comedy and your, silly songs that you create and write and get that crowd going and kind of work in a room and, just, I mean, you are you draw that attention in, and I would call you a professional communicator, as a guy outside looking in, and you are good at making things make sense. And I think, you are a man that can eloquently deliver an extremely smooth, genuine, and sincere message that a lot of people can pick up in an easy way, and to touch those everyday average Americans. To make them maybe think in a way that is more critical, than what them just picking and choosing sides because of what their favorite athlete or whatever is telling them to do without doing very, any real research at all. Now, how does it make you feel knowing that your opinion matters to millions of people out there who look to you for inspiration, motivation, and a beacon of hope? I mean, that's the real.
It's a humbling thing, you've been in a situation where people are kind of listening to the words you say and looking to you for light and guidance. And, I always say that, the Apostle Paul said that we hold this treasure in earthen vessels. And one of my mentors from Middle Tennessee, he's a pastor and my pastor there in Georgia for a number of years. He said, and great mentor of mine, he said, that was Paul's way of saying that God puts his glory in cracked pots. But thank God that we have those cracks, because that lets the light shine through, right? So I know that my life doesn't make sense all the way around. I know that I've had a lot of failures and stumblings and failings and scars of the past. But, when I was growing up, I was a ball player, but I didn't idolize ball players. I didn't I was wise enough to say, I'm not going to grow up to be a professional ball player. I played longer than most of my peers did, but I knew that there was a shelf life on that, right? So I said, what do I want to do? And this was from a very young age. What do I want to do? And I knew that I wanted to talk to people. I knew that I wanted to be able to take concepts, and whether it was dramatically, eloquently, philosophically, poetically, I wanted to be able to take a phrase, twist it, say it in a way that maybe somebody has not thought about it. And then to this day, there are men and women out there who have the ability to look at a situation or circumstance and kind of come at it from another angle, an angle that the rest of the world's not looking at it from. And I love those people. I admire those people. And there's certain people out there who have just a gift that I just admire so much. So for me, my heroes were communicators, whether they were preachers, motivational speakers. I can remember turning on TV, early in the morning, getting ready to go to school, and James Robinson, televangelist, would be on there, and he'd be interviewing somebody, or he'd be preaching the gospel. And I was like, man, that is one eloquent guy. I mean, he just knows how to speak truth, and just really knows how to just grab these people and their emotions, and as well as their intellect. And I would watch that, and I'd read their books. And now James is a great friend of mine. He's a part of my life. And then I would watch, I'd flip over to Fox News, and I would hear before podcasts were happening, these guys would be having these sit down interviews. And I can remember watching Glenn Beck, interviewing these celebrities and having an in-depth conversation with them. And now, tomorrow morning I'll get up, go into the studio, and I'll walk right past Glenn and wave to him while he's finishing up his radio show in the morning. And so I've always admired these guys, emulated them. And I used to think of things like, all right, because I used to go out of the country a lot when I was in my early 20s, and I'd go to these third world countries. I'd come back, and these churches and civic groups would want me to come in and tell stories of my trips. And so, I used to think of like, okay, how should I stand on the stage? What do I do with my hands? Kind of like Ricky Bobby. I don't know what to do with my hands. What's the most effective way to deliver this phrase? And I just got to a point where I was, I love what the gospel writer said, talking about John the Baptist. He was the voice of one crying in the wilderness. I love that phrase. He was a voice. He wasn't an echo. He wasn't saying what others were saying. He was a lone voice. He was the only one saying it. And I know there's nothing new under the sun, but a long time ago, I realized I was trying to emulate all these other communicators, which was good. There's nothing wrong with that. But I was kind of wearing Saul's armor. I was trying to be those other communicators. And the most liberating thing that ever happened to me, Brian, the most liberating thing, I always tell people it took me 42 years to realize who I am. But somewhere around the age of 42, I realized it's okay to just be yourself and just be me. And I think the biggest compliment that I've gotten over and over all these years when I'm in front of people or doing videos or just talking to them is people say, you're real, you're genuine. What you see is what you get. And I think that's the biggest thing that people can say to me that's a compliment, because it tells me that I finally discovered who I am. It's my identity, not somebody else's. And I try to be a voice, not an echo. So I love talking to people. I've always said, if I could get people to stand still or walk slow, I'll talk to you. I am genuinely a people person, which is unlike a lot of people that make a living in the comedy industry. Most comedians are introverts, they're depressed. And while I've dealt with depression, I'm certainly not introverted. I might be getting a little more introverted as I get into my old age, but I love people. I mean, and that's not blowing smoke, man. I love hearing their stories. I love hearing their trials and things they've been through. And I'm almost generous to a fault with that, because a lot of times people can manipulate your time and they can steal your time. but I genuinely care about people. And I think that's something that translates in the way I communicate, at least I hope. And, I'm not afraid to pray with you, not afraid to cry with you, laugh with you, get mad with you, and hopefully that translates as genuine, because it's something I think that has motivated me to be more effective in the world of communication.
Yeah, I mean, you are very sincere and you are very genuine, and I've been listening to you for quite some time now. Probably around when you were 43, 44 is when I started listening to you, and I was sick in a chair, so I didn't have anything to do except for look forward to the videos that I was seeing on Facebook at the time when you were doing all those from
Right.
the pickup of your truck. But you figured it out at 42 and you're 50 now.
Yeah.
So I mean, guys, look, that right there is the definition of getting 1% better every single day and trying to figure out who you are. And then once you figure that out and you begin to know that I don't need to be a people pleaser anymore, and I can actually live life without trying again, all the deep thoughts and all the conversations that you have almost every single day on your Facebook lives or from your pickup truck, they're all very real, and they're all from like real life experience that you're going through, or what the country is going through, whatever. What really inspires you? What really motivates you to like sit down and create that dialogue? And do you see a lot of the times one side or another side picking on you because of what you're saying, or vice versa?
Yeah, every day I wake up, and this is the truth. Every day, the first thought, and I'm an early riser. I'm usually up and going around 5 o'clock in the morning. Today I was 4:30. I don't set an alarm. It's just my internal clock. Here's the reason why I'm that way, Brian. I'm kind of weird. It's not like I'm some big self-disciplined person, because I'm not. But here's the thing. I feel like it took me 42 years to realize who I am, and I don't want to miss out on any of that. I was a late bloomer. Now, I've lived a lot of life. I've done a lot of things in life that people say, man, you've lived basically 3 lives in 50 years. But since 42, like when I woke up to being who I was created to be, it was so exciting to me. When I caught that vision, it ignited so much passion in me that now I don't want to sleep through it. So I get up in the mornings, I go to bed. These days I go to bed reasonably early. Not unusual for me to be zonked out by 10 o'clock. And these days that's late for me. It used to not be. But, 4:30 in the morning, I'm up, man. I'm wide open. And my first thought is, what's going on in me? Like, what did I dream about? What do I remember from yesterday? What's lingering in my soul? And I'm thinking, if I'm dealing with that, there's a good chance that somebody else might be dealing with that too. So a lot of those truck videos that I've done historically were kind of those observational humor rants. Those were my way of saying, everybody's been to the Little League park and watched these parents lose their mind, right? We ought to make fun of that. Or everybody, gets frustrated with the person in front of them in traffic that doesn't use their blinker. We should talk about that. There's a lot of people from the South who are tired of getting made fun of and being told they're just trailer park trash. We should talk about the culture of the South and how great it is. There's a lot of people who wonder why we brag about Texas so much. Maybe I should do a video about that. So those things always resonated with people, because I was thinking, hey, I'm dealing with this. I'm thinking about this. Maybe somebody else is dealing with it too. So you mix that in with, like here recently, this thought just crossed my head early last week, where I thought, so many people are unhappy today. Like, people are just frustrated. There's so much outrage. And I started thinking, why we're that way is because we're not hardwired for happiness. We're hardwired for survival. Our ancestors lived in the cave, and they didn't know when the saber-toothed tiger was going to come in and turn dinner. And so it's kind of hard to be happy when you're looking over your shoulder, because you're being, preyed upon by some wild animal or a dinosaur out there. And I think that there's this innate thing in us, especially today, says, how can I afford gas? How can I afford groceries? Am I going to have a retirement? We don't have Social Security. We got a moron for president. All these things that you're going, all these people are worried about these things. And it's hard to be happy when you're worried about just surviving. And so, I've been thinking about stuff like that. I've been thinking about stuff like we get outraged, right? We get upset. We're so mad. And my book that came out in 2020, Am I Crazy? The audio book just came out last week. And I was re-listening to some of that. And in there, I talk about an expert who said there's no real emotion like anger. There's no real, anger is not a real emotion, but it's an amalgam of two things, sadness and fear. So when we express anger or rage, it's because we're sad about something or we're afraid of something, and maybe both. And so I was thinking about that, and I was like, why are we so pissed off, right? We're a pissed off culture. I mean, everything from road rage to, 65% marriage or divorce rates. I mean, why are we so angry? And you go online and everybody's at each other's throat. You ask it if I have, different sides that come at me. Man, I got every side that comes at me at this point. And it's because our anger is overrunning its boundaries at this point. We're lashing out at everything. We're like, the old country preacher said, you can skin a fox once, and after that it gets touchy. We're all touchy. We've all been skinned a little bit, especially in the last few years. And so I started asking myself, why are we so angry? And I said, I'm the only person who knows me like I know me. Me and God. God and I are the only two beings in the universe that truly know what keeps me awake at night, what I'm afraid of, what I'm worried about, what my deep thoughts are, what my lusts are, what my appetites are. We're the only ones who know. And most people aren't privy to that information. So why do we give them permission to piss us off, right? They shouldn't have that kind of permission. So we got to take that back. And there's some things that are precious that we, and you could summarize all of that. Jesus said, don't throw your pearls before swine. And we're doing that every day. We're not careful with things that God's put in us, those talents. And we throw them out there and people abuse them. And then we wonder why we're angry at the world. So it's things like that I look at, and it's like, I'm feeling this. I'm sure there's other people who are feeling it too. Now, how can I concisely say that without it sounding preachy, without it sounding like I'm telling you what to do? But how can I say that so that you know that I actually care about you? And the reason I care is because I'm going through this too, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of times I'll put those posts out there and my mother will call or somebody will reach out and they'll be like, dude, what are you going through? And I'm like, well, nothing really. It just, I'm just thinking about these things. And, right. And so, and I figure somebody is going through it or at least thinking about it too. So let's talk about it. And so I've got a relatively large platform with which that I can put these thoughts out there. And it's a vulnerable place to be. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with transparency. I'm okay with looking weak. And it's amazing the responses that come back, from people who say, man, wow, I needed that today. Or, God really spoke through you on that. And for me, that's my reward. That's my deal. Because again, I don't get paid for putting posts on Facebook. I do all that for free. Now, hopefully it builds an audience that later on we can go out, whether it's a live show or the podcast or the TV show or whatever. But yeah, all those kind of things, that's just me loving people. And that sounds cliche to say, but it really is true.
Education is very expensive, but knowledge is free. And you offer your knowledge and, you put it all out there. And it's up to the people. It's up to your followers kind of pick and choose what they want to add to their life to make that walk in life that much better for them. And that's where your inspiration, that's where your light, your beacon of hope, encouragement and all that stuff comes into play. But like I've said, you are a man that can eloquently, and I use that word eloquently, deliver an extremely smooth, genuine, and sincere message in a way that makes sense for everybody out there, and not like twist things around. I mean, you give it to them straight, right? About as straight as you can give these people. Now, and oftentimes these topics are very serious. Yeah. But you find a way to put a comedic tone to it so you could even engage with folks and even make them laugh, even when the topic is very serious. Now, that's hard to do. And that's not an easy walk. And like you said, hey, look, I make myself vulnerable every single day. People are going to be coming at me and this and that. Now, does it take a lot of courage for a guy like you to stand up every single day and put these videos out and kind of wonder like, man, are people going to look at me? How are people going to, are they going to judge me and this and that? Because let's face it, a lot of people in our country are afraid of what others think of them. And now I know you don't necessarily think that way, but at some point in time, did you ever feel that way? And have you built up that shield of protection, if you will, in that shield of in that courage, if you will, to keep going and doing what you're doing and really living the life that you were intended to live?
I read a book back around 97, 98 by John Bevere, who, and I think the name of the book was The Rejection of Man. And in the book, and I'm paraphrasing, he said, I got my little dog here. I got to put her up here. She's omnipresent, the Biscuit. But in the book, he said, if the acceptance of man can make you, then the rejection of man will destroy you. And so, Rudyard Kipling, in his great poem, If, he said, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same, they're both fake, right? Acceptance of man, triumph, failure, rejection of man, all of those are a lie. All of those things are a lie. So if you're living for someone's acceptance, then you're also living for their rejection. If one can make you, one can destroy you. So I just made up my mind a long time ago that I wasn't going to let either one of those lies into my heart, right? And that's hard. And I wish I could say I'm 100% right on that all the time, but I'm not. Because sometimes people do things that they do hurt you. I mean, I'm not Iron Man here that, built of iron. You do have things that hurt you. Mm-hmm. Even God himself, the Holy Spirit talks about being grieved. And that, by the way, is a love word. You can't grieve someone that doesn't love you. Some stranger screams an obscenity to me on social media. That doesn't grieve me. But if my daughter did it, that's a whole other story, right? Because I love my daughter, or one of my kids. That would grieve me if I watched them doing something destructive with their own lives. Mm-hmm. So you have to separate, the people that, what is the old adage, those that matter don't mind and those that mind don't matter. You got to figure out who matters in your life. Mm-hmm. The masses out there, ultimately, while I care about you in general, you don't matter at the end of the day, because one, you don't have permission to affect my life like that. I haven't given you that permission. And also, you're not going to stand with me in front of God one day to give an account. That's going to be me and God. Mm-hmm. So I have to make sure that I'm right, first of all, and other people's opinions aren't making or breaking me. It's hard. That's a hard thing to do. It's easier things said than done. And now look at look at the families that have been broken up, or everything from, the forced, injections we've had to deal with, corporately or medically, or the separation of politics has brought into our lives sociologically, the medical mandates, the various things with COVID. I mean, people are at each other's throats these days, and you have to ask yourself, okay, what's it worth? Just this morning, people think I'm very provocative. They think I'm a pot stirrer, and maybe in some ways I am. But like, I have certain Facebook pages. Like, there's one that is run by Blaze Media. Blaze puts their articles on there. It's under my name, but Blaze puts their articles on there. And every now and then there's an editor who will throw a caption up there. And like this morning, there was one that was a little callous towards somebody. And I sent the editors a message. I said, would you please stop saying things in a mean spirit just to get clicks on an article? I would never say that. And people think that I'm the one saying that. And I said, I went in and edited the post on the thing, although I never mess with that page. And because, again, I'm not trying to be provocative for the sake of pissing people off. I want people to think. I want people to realize that we're in this world that has now made critical thinking and complexity of thought something that doesn't exist anymore. The Socratic method is defunct. The idea of a hypothesis, the scientific method, is no longer done. Now we have mainstream media and the government and whatever powers that be that are telling us what the answers are before we even have a chance to walk through it ourselves. And that's dangerous. So, a lot of people lash out at me because I'm just asking you to think critically. I may use humor to do that. I may use sarcasm to do that. I may use hyperbole. I may cuss at you. My mother's like, don't cuss. And I'm like, well, Mom, sometimes that's effective. Sometimes that gets their attention. And you have to use these different methods. To the point you said, I've always said, if I could take common sense and wrap it in a little bit of humor, it becomes an easier pill to swallow.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we have to shock people into waking up, because we really are a nanny state. We really have trusted that the government and all these powers out there are with us. They're going to hatch us. They're going to match us. They're going to dispatch us, right? They're there when we're born, there when we get married, have our kids, and there when we die. Hatch, match, dispatch. And they're supposed to take care of us cradle to grave. But now people are waking up and going, man, maybe my government doesn't have the best interest for me at heart. Maybe big healthcare doesn't have my best interest at heart. Maybe all these social media companies and maybe the news media is even lying to me. What do I believe anymore? And then you read your history book and you realize that it's chock full of man's inhumanity to man and all these atrocious things we've done to each other throughout millennia of existence.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're like, what do we do here? Well, one of the things is I always ask myself, I say, when I look at a situation, I say, am I thinking about this critically? For me, critical thinking starts with asking yourself this question. Am I wrong? Am I wrong? I have very strong opinions about things, right? We all do. When I enter into a situation, whether I'm talking to somebody, getting into a debate or whatever, I always try to start with, am I wrong? Because if I can prove myself wrong, then why do I even need to bring it out into the light, right? So before I open my mouth, I want to feel reasonably convinced that the words coming out are accurate and true before I go out there and get to, I'm deceiving someone for using those words. And we don't do that anymore. We just talk off the top of our head. I mean, just whatever pablum we can burp up and throw out there. And, before we jumped on here, it's funny, as an example, I ran over to Instagram and there was a person on there, one of these reels. This person was talking about how to be a content creator on social media. And they were talking about this program, which is AI. You type in a phrase, it'll give you 100 phrases on this topic that basically you can use for your status or your post or whatever you want to do if you need a caption for a picture. And I was like, here we are, rather than using our own voice on social media, critically thinking about what we want to say. Now we have this program out there that will create, using artificial intelligence, a phrase for you to copy and paste. That is crazy to me. Like, we've gotten so lazy that we don't even think anymore. Thinking is uncomfortable. We don't even want to think about our own thoughts, much less put them to words anymore. And for a guy like me, I consider myself somewhat of a poet. I'm a wordsmith in that regard. I love vocabulary. I love grammar. I love these ways that human language can motivate people and inspire them. And I'm like, now we're going to turn it all over to artificial intelligence? That's insane to me, dude. I just don't think, I don't think my forefathers lived and died to turn that world over to me. I just don't think they did. We went 245 years of American existence. We went from, this incredibly almost divine inspired document like the Constitution to now we got Jarvis.com determining what our Facebook status is going to be. Mm-hmm. I mean, our fathers have to be rolling over in their graves over this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know what to say. And I think that's why, people value your opinion, because you aren't afraid to say what's on their mind and you are unapologetic about it. And now the news has become a big giant opinion. And then, you ask, hey, am I wrong? Well, half the people will say you're wrong and half the people will say you're right, even though you're wrong, or even though you're right. It doesn't matter. It seems as if we have been so divided as a country. Like I said, you are an independent thinker. You're a critical thinker, if you will. Over the years, I have observed how many people will blindly jump on sides based solely on political party, socioeconomic status, or the influencers that they follow. Now, most of this is happening without people doing their own research or drawing their own conclusions. Again, it seems as if nobody thinks for themselves anymore. Now, where are we headed, Chad?
That's a good question. I'll just tell you in a nutshell, if the spring is wound really tight right now. The pendulum is about as far to one side as it can go, where it's either going to swing back or the clock's going to break, right? And so we're truly at a sociological, critical, political, philosophical, metaphysical. We're at a breaking point. We really are. So I said 25 years ago to a group of people, when I would have the opportunity to get on a stage and speak to people, because I made a living as a motivational guy years ago. And I said, we're entering into this age of postmodernism. It's here, and postmodernism, even the experts on postmodernism cannot explain to us or define to us what postmodernism is. In a nutshell, it's whatever your reality needs to be is what it can be. So now we have certain phrases like my truth and your truth instead of objective truth. And I can feel like a woman and therefore I am a woman. Doesn't matter what genitals I was born with. I heard somebody the other day talking about they weren't going to have a gender reveal party. They were going to have a genital reveal party because the child had not determined. They were going to wait and see what their unborn baby decided its sex was. That's the essence of living in a postmodern society. It's where feelings trump facts, and my emotions are king, and that's a controlling factor. I don't feel like doing it, and we've been conditioned that way. I don't want to think about it. So where we're headed is subjugation. If we don't turn this tide back, we're headed to subjugation. So look at it like this. The economy is already in the tank. We've already spent well over $1 billion or $100 billion in Ukraine fighting somebody else's war. Regardless of what anybody's feelings are on that, I can make a real solid argument that thing's gotten way out of hand a long time ago. People can't afford their own groceries, but yet we're going to give, a country that's historically been a money laundering country for our own corrupt government officials, we're going to give them hundreds of billions of dollars to fight their war that really doesn't have an effect on us. Then we're going to blame inflation on the invading armies, such as a dictator like Vladimir Putin. And we're devaluing the dollar. The dollar is worthless now. It has been the global currency, but because of our imports or the import we're giving Russia and all these different things that we're giving them the power to do, they're sending all of their resources to China, empowering China, devaluing the dollar even further. So it's going to get to a point where we have no choice but to be subjugated, right? We're going to wind up subjugated to some, whether it's a foreign power or some form of philosophy like the World Economic Forum or the World Health Organization or the United Nations. You can pick your cabal at this point. We're already subjugated. When Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and some of these others came out a couple of years ago with this idea called the Green New Deal, we laughed at it because it was so stupid. It was just so stupid. How are we going to have an infrastructure rebuilding plan for the United States of America that's going to have a price tag of $91 trillion? I mean, that amount of money doesn't exist on the globe. So how are we going to do that? Well, they do it by what we're seeing now. There's no such thing as debt. There's no such thing as deficit. They're getting away from a credit score. They're getting away from, they're getting away from something that's backed by gold or silver or precious metals. And they're moving to a cashless society. It's a credit-based system, but it's not a credit-based system based on the merits of how you have handled yourself fiscally or your investments economically, but on your social justice scores. So now we have what's called modern monetary theory that says, forget all of that. Let's just determine what somebody is worth based on how they view the world as we interpret it. So, have you said anything racist? Have you said anything misogynistic, bigoted, xenophobic? Have you said anything homophobic? Have you posted anything that could be misconstrued on social media? Well, then we're gonna dock you for that. You don't have the ability to go out and barter and trade that you used to have. How are you treating the planet? Are there solar panels on your home? Are you driving an electric car? Are you banning fossil fuels? What's your carbon footprint? How are you, running your business? Are there enough minority hires? Are there diversity hires? Are there inclusion hires? Or do you have trans people working for you? Or is the LGBTQ 2+ whatever community being represented in your business? If not, well, then we're going to dock you. And people say, well, that would never happen. Well, our major corporations are already doing it. They're already doing it. And, the people are calling that being woke. And what I call that is insanity, because we can't hold up under that. Take Disney. So they just rehired Bob Iger to come back in and be the CEO of Disney. Disney lost like $122 billion in 2022. I mean, they were an absolute dismal failure. They kept trotting out these woke BS cartoons, trying to indoctrinate kids, everything from gay kisses to out LGBT main characters and stuff. And the people, by and large, the public said, no, we're not going to entertain our kids with this garbage, with this smut. So at least we have a little bit of a conscience left that says we're going to hold these people accountable. But at the end of the day, these companies, they don't care. They don't care. They're going to operate by this modern monetary theory, the ESG scores, things like that. And if we don't overcome that with common sense and inconvenience ourselves a little bit, both with critical thinking, how we spend our money, the people that we do business with, and so on and so forth, the people we listen to, then we will be subjugated. That's a long way to answer that question, but we are headed towards subjugation. And I know that off of looking at the last 4,000 years of human history. That's just what happens to a society after 250 years of being in power.
What goes up must come down. And
unfortunately, that's true.
I pray every day for my country and, for the healing that we all come together. And it's just, we've gotten so far down this dark path, and really I don't see how we're going to get out of it. And again, I always hope for the best, but you put your cowboy hat into politics, and you hit every county in the state of Texas, and you grew even more fondly and deep in love with the state of Texas. And a lot of people, oh yeah, he's just a dumb redneck, from the backwoods of Georgia, until they hear you speak. And then once they hear you speak, and they're like, man, this guy's probably the best in the room. And again, I say that with full respect. And unless people know you personally, they'll understand what I'm saying. And if you guys listen to him every day, you'll understand, because this guy just spits words out that just makes sense. And again, in a very eloquent way that makes sense for everybody, even for the people that aren't very bright, out there. So I want you to describe what that campaign trail looked like, and if you learned anything when you were out there meeting the people of Texas.
One of the hardest things I've ever done, one of the craziest things I've ever done. I was with Donald Trump Jr. in July 2nd of 2020. I was with Don Trump Jr., Kristi Noem. We were waiting on President Trump the next day to come into town to speak. Kristi Noem, of course, the governor of South Dakota. And we were waiting on Trump to come speak at Mount Rushmore the following night. It was going to be the first time they had a fireworks 4th of July celebration there for 17 years. And we were there the night before, and I'm sitting there, and my phone goes off, and it tells me that Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, is passing down more mandates, more shutdowns, more masks, all of these things. And I was just, I joke about, I had enough wine and I'm sitting with a Trump. So I jumped on Twitter and said I was going to run for governor in 2022. And I had no idea the firestorm that I opened up by saying that, because I didn't know if people would take it seriously. I meant that I was going to do it, and I followed through. I did it. I wish in 19 months of campaigning up to March 1st of 22, whenever that primary election was held, there were a lot of times, boy, I wanted to quit. But my daddy taught me when I was in middle school, when I was playing football and I wanted to quit in the middle of the season because the coach was being mean and rough on us. My dad said, you don't have to play next season, but you're not quitting this season. And I took that attitude into running for governor. I had no money. When you look at some of these campaigns that were run, I mean, Greg Abbott had $75 million Some of these other campaigns, these primary candidates spend anywhere from 14 to 25 million. And I think I might have spent $1 million, maybe $1 million total, the whole thing when it was all said and done. A lot of that my own money. And, we didn't have any big donors. No hooks were in me to try to drag me along. There were no political consultants trying to talk me into doing it. The big machine thought it was a joke. And maybe to some it was a joke. But everywhere I go, Brian, I was just in College Station the other night. Then I was in Canyon Lake on New Year's Day. And hundreds of people come out to these shows that I'm doing. And so many people come up and say, we voted for you. We'll do it again. And there's a lot of people out there who said, we voted for another candidate because that's who we were committed to early on. But we would have gladly voted for you if the circumstances had been different. And I understand what they're saying. So for me, it was educational. I was able to go out there. I was able to visit the state of Texas, all of it. It's such a big state. I was able to visit with these people. I was able to hear what they had to say. I think I taught them some things. And I know they taught me a lot of things. And it made me realize how much I don't know. And the biggest thing, my biggest takeaway when it was all said and done is everywhere I went, people said, they'd hear me speak and they'd say, you made me fall in love with Texas again. For me, that was the biggest thing that I could have done. I think that is what you want in somebody that's wanting to lead you politically. I would want the people in Washington, D.C. to make us love America. But unfortunately, they've kind of created an America that it's hard to love, They've certainly created an America that's not united. We're not the United States anymore. And I would hope that the governor of Texas or whatever state you're in would be somebody that makes you love your state. I would want our city council and our mayor, whoever that may be, to be the person that makes you love the area you live in. I mean, that's their job, right? And so that was a big compliment when people said, man, you made me love Texas again. So a lot of people, always the next question is, will I do it again? I don't know. I will never do it again the way I did it. I'll put it that way. But what I do next, we'll see. They may not want me. And it may be that I could be more effective doing something else. Whatever I do will be in the best interest. For me, it's about state politics now. I think Texas matters more than anything else, because if Texas fails and falls, then the United States. I borrow an illustration from my buddy Colonel Allen West. And he was one of my primary opponents. And one of the things that I've heard Allen say is that if you took a puzzle of America and you put it up like this, here all the states were a puzzle piece. Down here in the middle at the bottom is Texas. If you took that big puzzle piece out, the whole puzzle falls apart. And I think that's true, right? What happens in Washington, D.C., it's an ish show. I cleaned the language up for your show, but it's a mess, dude. It's at the time of this taping, we saw in the news that Kevin McCarthy didn't get the votes to be Speaker of the House. Even the GOP in Washington, D.C. is so divided. It's become something that we don't even adhere to anymore. As a small government, limited government, conservative that wants to be left alone, I'm disappointed with what I see those who call themselves conservatives in the establishment of the GOP and the Republican Party have become. And so for me, it's about Texas. We got to save Texas. My friend Jeff Younger, his son, James, so Texas Supreme Court just allowed his mother. She's going to be able to take him to California and work on transitioning that little boy into a girl. That's the state of Texas, is allowing that mother to do that. That story's made headlines across the nation, around the world. Jeff Younger's been on my show a couple of times talking about this. This is Texas. And these are the things that are happening. Whenever you can go to drag queen story hour or quote family friendly drag shows, or Collin County is having satanic rallies. This is Texas. These are the things that are happening in what we call a conservative bastion in the United States. We're a red state, right? But we're under attack. So for me right now, my main focus is Texas. what's Texas going to look like in the next 5-10 years? One of the things I told people after giving them some history lessons on Texas and trying to motivate them with Texas history, I reminded them, I said, we can talk about the Crockett's and the Houstons and the Travises and the Austins and the Bowies and the Seguins. We could talk about, the Fannons and the Burnett's and all of these great names of Texas history. But here's the thing, Texas history is still being written. And is your name going to be on there? Is there going to be a Prather? Is there going to be a Talley? Whose name is going to be 100 years from now still in the annals of Texas history, who have done something to fight for Texas to the point, and to fight for freedom to the point where your name was worth remembering? So someone in a historical society that I'm a part of said recently, they said, if you look at a political figure and they are lauded and praised by everyone, particularly both sides, then they were scum and a piece of trash. You just didn't know it. So I don't want to be scum. I want people to not like me for the things that I say and do and the positions that I hold, because I think that's where we live admirably. Walt Mason said, there's a man in this world who's never turned down wherever he chances to stray. He gets a glad hand in a populous town and out where farmers make hay, greeted with pleasure in deserts of sand, and deep in the aisle of the woods, wherever he goes, there's a welcoming hand. He's the man who delivers the goods. I want to be a man that delivers the goods, right? You're a man that delivers the goods. Brian, I've read your book. I know your story. You and I have talked. I know your story. You deliver the goods, man. And those are the people that are going to change history. Those are the folks that like what's the movie with Robert Duvall and Michael Caine, and they raise that little boy that's their nephew with secondhand lions, and all these wild stories of their life that everybody thought was just mythology. And then at the end, this guy walks up and he says, wow, these guys really lived. And the boy they raised, he says, yeah, they really lived. That's what I think I want our ethics at the end is we really lived. And we live to make a difference. And what happened, regardless of what public opinion was of us at the time, history looks back and says, we might not have liked those guys. They might have been a little abrasive. We might not have liked everything they said or the way they went about things, but they made a difference. Mm-hmm. I think that starts with knowing who you are, knowing where you're going, knowing where you came from, and knowing what you're leaving behind. Because here's the thing, if you know where you came from, that's history. You know who you are, that's identity. You know where you're going, destiny. Legacy, that thing you're going to leave behind, takes care of itself. So whether that's running for office or, holding a seat, a position of delegated authority somewhere as an elected representative, or you're just a guy that sits in his truck with a dog in the back seat and runs his mouth every now and then, who knows what that sphere of influence looks like? But at the end of the day, you got to hope that in the hands of God, it becomes something special.
You are the man. It's like, again, every single time I sit down and have a conversation with you or just listen to you speak or, on Facebook or whatever it may be in person, again, you offer so much inspiration and education and knowledge and the encouragement and all the hallmarks that it takes to be a good, successful citizen, a contributor, somebody that's going to do the right thing, that's going to stand up in the face of adversity and fight for what's right and do it in an honorable way. And you're an honorable man. And again, you make things make sense in a comedic way where we can all sit down, gather around a campfire, enjoy a laugh, and still be very serious in the topic of conversation. And I think that is very healthy. Now, folks, we are being joined by Chad Prather, and we are short on time here. So, guys, go to watchchad.com. Be the first to know when Chad is headed to a city near you and get your exclusive access to tickets, videos, news, merchandise like that y'all hat, and much more on watchchad.com. That's watchchad.com. And I understand what you mean when you say, you know what, 42, I figured it out. I figured it out. Now at 50, I live a life of gratitude. And I want to get up and I want to get out of bed and I want to attack the world. And I know I had that same feeling happen to me in 2019. Mm-hmm. So I know exactly how you feel. And again, it's hard to explain unless you've kind of lived it. But I just want to thank you so much for joining us today, Chad. was certainly an honor and a great privilege to have you on the Tuesdays with Tally show to be our first episode of 2023.
Thank you. Thank you.
Until next time, for Tuesdays with Tally, this is Brian Tally. Good night, Semper Fi, and God bless.